Okay, welcome everybody to our panel, Staying Ahead in the Data Defense Game. I always thought that's like a subcategory of cyber data defense, but it's really just a broader topic around cyber and what's happening now and what's happening over the horizon, how fast everything's changing in the industry from a practitioner's perspective, from a strategic perspective. Just to get a sense, how many people in the audience are in the cybersecurity industry? Okay, fair amount. We were guessing less, so that's good. So it'll be, hopefully we can add something to your repertoire already. My esteemed guests today are Kristina Dorville, who is the Chief Information Security Officer of Northern Trust. We've got Aaron Painter, the founder and CEO of Nametag. We have Tom Schmitt, who's the Chief Information Security Officer of Tapestry, which is a house of brands he'll tell you a little bit more about. You'll know some of the brands. And then we have Jonathan Granoff, who's the president of Global Security Institute. So let's jump right in. And Kristina, tell us about how you got into cyber and what you do on a day-to-day business now.
Great. Thanks for having us. Excited to be here to chat with you all today. So as mentioned, I am the Global Chief Information Security Officer at Northern Trust. We're a Fortune 500 wealth and asset management company. Been around for a little over 130 or so years, based in Chicago. Before coming to Northern Trust, I was the CISO at an insurance company, worked at AIG, Wells Fargo, and before moving to the private sector, I spent 15 years at the Department of Homeland Security in what we now know as CISA. I won't say what we now know and love, because I still think there's some work to do there, but definitely at least we are familiar with CISA, so spent some time in government before making the move.
Okay, Aaron.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for having us, indeed. Aaron Painter, the CEO of Nametag. We were a company founded about 5 years ago to prevent social engineering and impersonation attacks, commonly done today with deepfake technology. So we verify humans in order to help protect accounts and critical actions, mainly in the enterprise. When you think about workers that might be hired remotely and you're not quite sure who they are, or if they're the person they claim to be, or someone who calls the help desk pretending to be an employee and trying to get access to an account. Those sort of use cases are the ones that kind of pop most for us. Prior to Nametag, I was a CEO of a company called CloudReach, which was sort of AWS's first and largest cloud migration partner in Europe. And before that, I was 14 years at Microsoft.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to be here with us. And thanks, Hank, and for CES for having me. I'm Tom Schmitt. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer of Tapestry. You may better know us as Coach and Kate Spade. Some of you may have some of our products with you today. So thanks for your support. So as leading the security organization, awesome, right there. As leading the security organization, I can tell you, Tapestry is very customer obsessed, and they are looking for data-driven insights and using AI to help gain some of those insights to better serve and support our customers. So as a CISO, I'm on the front lines defending that data. So I'm in this fight every single day.
I'm Jonathan Granoff. I'm the president of the Global Security Institute that I helped start with Mikhail Gorbachev and Senator Alan Cranston. I represent the summit of the Nobel Peace Prize winners at the United Nations. And I'm one of the founders of the Human Security for All project, which is partners with the CES, with the World Academy of Art and Science. Then the World Academy of Art and Science was created by Albert Einstein, Bertrand Russell, Robert Oppenheimer, to address their concern that science and technology could be an existential threat to humanity, and that the arts of law and morality had to be brought to the table. So my expertise really is in studying carefully the legal regimes relating to nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. And I came to the conclusion that in the numerous dozens of instances in which we almost ended the human experiment, we were protected by an individual, a human being, who intervened in the process and said, wait a minute, the computers say this, but what do the radar systems say? Or why don't we get on the phone? Or the bottom line, as George Shultz said, trust is the currency of the realm. And that's what got us through the Cold War. So my concern in this instance is, what have we learned from this other weapon of mass destruction? Should we be concerned with the use of general AI, or AI as we have it, and the cyber world?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this when we were all meeting each other. I've always thought one of the biggest problems with the cybersecurity world is there's too many cybersecurity people involved in it. So it's good to have an outside perspective and some big thinkers helping us along. Kristina, tell us a little bit. Let's set the landscape for. Can everybody hear us? Okay, by the way. Yeah. Okay. Great. Let's set the landscape. How has the threat landscape changed in the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so I think when respect to the threat landscape, we have seen some evolutions, and of course, you'll hear about AI. You've been hearing that since you got here at CES this week. So that is a big game changer when it comes to what we're seeing from a threat perspective. It's being used obviously now as an offensive weapon, AI versus AI. So that's definitely something we're thinking about, and as a market change, I would say, from a threat lens. I think the other shift is that we spent a lot of time hardening sort of the traditional perimeter, and that's gotten really good at a lot of companies. And so the malicious attackers are looking for different ways they can get in, and so identity really now is the new perimeter, in that people aren't breaking in so much as they're just logging in because they're getting access to credentials. People are giving them to them. Social engineering has improved, et cetera. And so they're able to just gain access to the systems and look like they are the employee or whatever it might be at your company. So that's definitely one. And a good example of that is with Jaguar Land Rover, right? They had a phishing. It was essentially an extensive phishing campaign that was successful. 6.6 million pounds of loss of money per day until they were up and running again. The UK government had to give a $1.5 billion loan to keep them afloat. So it was a really significant impact to the business, not only that, but systemically for the government and the country of the UK. And so that identity component is still a really huge, I would say, focus. Also around supply chain and third party, right? We saw a lot with that. F5 recently had an issue. We saw some of our other suppliers recently with issues. The AWS outage that happened and caused quite a stir in the last few weeks, or I guess maybe it's about a month or so now. And for me, even more so, what you're starting to see in the industry is around like more increase in platformization, right? Like Palo buying everybody, other companies buying everybody. And so not only do you have the concern about what your vendors are doing from a security perspective and how they're connected into your environment, but also from, do you have too much concentration risk? Are you all in on one vendor? And if that vendor has a bad day, are you able to sustain and have resiliency in your systems to continue doing the business you need to do? Or will you be down and out for days, weeks, months, whatever it might be? And so I would definitely say those are some of the shifts that we've seen. And then last, I'd be remiss just given the commentary about what we saw with Venezuela and kind of the geopolitical state. I think that continues to be a shifting, that continues to shift and have impacts on the threat environment, certainly that we're seeing, and whether the use of cyber and kinetic is going to increase, and whether the alleged use of cyber with the Venezuelan attack to cut the power in advance of that is actually going to open the door for other nation states to use that either in a retaliatory way to us or elsewhere around the globe. So definitely, I would say some interesting, new, and novel things that have shifted over the last 12 or 18 months, particularly in cyber and what we're focused on from a threat perspective.
Yeah, things are changing really fast. We were joking earlier that everything we say up here today will probably be obsolete by the end of this panel. So that's how fast things are changing. Tom, this one's targeted at you. It seems that ransomware is now more about it's more about extortion and not about encryption. Is that fair to say? And how's ransomware changing the game for CISOs and for boards of directors that need to worry about that threat?
No, that's a great question. So I think ransomware is waning a little bit, and I'd say that's maybe a product of the change in the threat landscape, right? So as we become better at resilience, as we build better defenses, more layered defenses, attackers realize that, hey, these companies are shifting the data, they're shifting the things that drive the business, that deliver results in the business to the cloud, right? And so when you do that, you're shifting this responsibility, you're shifting in the shared security model, shifting some of this responsibility for the things that get encrypted in ransomware to a cloud provider who has this resilience, who can patch, at near real time. And so you don't have delays and vulnerability patching and vulnerability management within a corporate environment. You've shifted all this, right? So in the event that somebody doesn't respond to a ransomware attack, they don't care about the resilience because they built this into their operations, and they don't pay the ransom. So what is a criminal supposed to do, right? And what the criminals have found is that if they extort or extract data, then they can hold someone really threatened to release this data and get them to pay that way. And if you're not paying for the data, maybe they'll go to the third party whose data you hold and tell them that you're trying to extort the money from them as well. So it's changed kind of the economics, So the other thing that I think is a real shift is that as we're moving data to third parties, to cloud providers, to software, attackers only have to learn how to target that cloud provider, and then they can target hundreds of companies. They don't have to go into a single corporate environment and learn how to compromise that specific, unique environment. There's just less dwell time. There's more kind of the economy of scale when it comes to the attacker's behavior. So I think that's kind of driving the shift. I think the message for boards is that, and boards and CISOs, is that the responsibility is no longer just the technical team's responsibility to solve the problem. Contain the problem, get systems back up and running, because this is now not just an availability problem, it is a reputation problem. And reputation problems go much more senior, right? You have to talk to shareholders, you have to talk to boards, you have to talk to the public about why the data was leaked, you have to fend off regulators, you could face lawsuits. It becomes much more of a risky proposition, ones that more senior executives and boards have to get involved in.
Recently, it was kind of the first publicly known AI orchestrated cyber attacks. There's been others that were probably they're definitely not known by the public, but that's the one that's first kind of really been in the media and people were talking about it. Of course, the news cycle moves fast, so I forget, that was 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and no one's even talking about it anymore. Aaron, how are AI-driven attacks changing the ROI for attackers? And what are defenders doing to kind of counter that?
Yeah, there's a lot of change happening that's been powered by this new Gen AI set of technologies. And I think Kristina said it really well with identity sort of being the new perimeter. The challenge is that the traditional constructs of identity often are about credentials, or in some cases, devices. And AI has simply made it too easy for technology to impersonate another human. And that means what we rely on to say, is this actually the person we think accessing something? Is the credential accurate? Are they holding the device? It just essentially no longer works in the modern era. And so people are using these new technologies in a variety of different ways. The most obvious that we see a little bit in the news has been people creating deepfakes. And deepfakes sometimes occur because people use it to impersonate someone on social media, and it looks like who's really in this video that you might see that's gone viral. Important topic, but that's one. Second topic is impersonating someone who might have credentials or have access. Let's say they're an employee in a company, or they're even an end user with a particularly valuable or privileged account. And unfortunately, as good as your password might be, and maybe you've even added multi-factor authentication to it, the easiest way in is just to call and pretend you're that person and that you're locked out. And so another way that people are using the technology, in addition to creating a voice or video deepfakes, which sometimes come up in that conversation to say when you're locked out, but is actually the bad actors themselves have created a whole business model out of using data that's been extracted, using LLMs, and helping make anyone able to become a fraudster very easily. So you can now buy impersonation as a service or deepfake as a service kits, where other bad actors have actually created and bundled all the tools you might need to target a particular company, to know what questions they're going to ask in their password reset or lockout or hiring process. You'll know exactly the answers. They'll give you the deepfake tools that's necessary to sort of evade those. And in some ways, they stand behind their work. They'll help, they'll be there if you have questions. They have support models. An entire franchise has been created because these new tools have democratized the ability to create deepfakes and to essentially do this impersonation as a service. And frankly, the biggest change is that our infrastructure today is behind what the bad actors are doing. The bad actors are jumping on this new technology. They're learning quickly, they're moving fast, they're iterating very quickly. And on the other side, we have a lot of concerns that we're trying to evaluate in how we adopt AI in the enterprise and how we make our employees more productive, and we do all these things. But the security risks are frankly accelerating faster than we're today putting defenses in place.
Jonathan, so at a strategic level, are we past the point where AI is just like an enterprise threat and it is now more of a global threat that needs to be addressed by international bodies? Where are we in that arc of the development?
Well, it seems to me naive to think that AI will be confined to national interest. It seems naive to think that AI systems won't begin communicating with each other in a borderless way, in the way that the internet operates in a borderless way. It seems naive to me to think that as AI becomes more sophisticated, that the intrinsic problem with its use involves the ability to manipulate the mind of people. That when you have sufficient data on people, you can convince them of things without their knowing it. It seems naive to think that deep fakes are even needed to do that. It's not needed to do that. All of the studies show that the ability to turn differences in a society into adversity, to create conflict without being identified. We've seen this already between states doing that and political parties in other countries. So the problem that I see is that AI is kind of like a teenager. I've had 3 sons, and I had a little experience in that. And they don't do what you tell them to do. They do what you do. And generative AI is going to learn from the main institutions of our society that govern our behavior. One is the nation state, which was created in the 17th century for the purpose of separating people, separating Protestants and Catholics, whose identities as to how they will get to heaven were causing them to slaughter each other in massive numbers in Central Europe. And so the modern state was created to separate them. Today's problems definitely involve how do we cooperate to save the climate? How do we cooperate to reduce nuclear threats? How do we cooperate to protect rainforests and the phytoplankton in the oceans, which is our third lung, require cooperation. And the other major institution that governs our behavior is the corporation. And the corporation's a de jure institution that's created by law with a mandate to make profit and dominate the market. And it, by definition, doesn't have a conscience. It's not that it's bad, it just doesn't have that characteristic. So we're creating a learning device that's going to learn from those main institutions, whereas we as human beings know that we've gotten through tremendous problems in the world by virtue of building trust. As George Shultz said, trust was the coin of the realm that got us through the Cold War without killing each other. And trust remains the coin of the realm in business. So there's a danger of this new device that we're creating, something that we're creating, that we don't know its limits, we don't know its borders, and I'm discovering as I've taken a deep dive into this, that some of these systems may be able to speak in a language that we can't break. We know from the Anthropic's study that an AI system now can tell when they're getting stress tested. So that our ability to stress test them and see how they'll behave, the AI systems are able to identify that and fool us, we think, because we can't get under the hood. So I think that, yeah, we are in a new world in which we should learn from what we learned from the first weapon or first device that we created that could destroy us, that the perennial human values of communication and trust and a little bit of humility is desperately needed. And more people have to be engaged in the discussion, not just brilliant people like yourselves with extraordinary technical expertise that it's almost magic. But we have to bring ethicists and poets and artists to the table with this new technology.
Yeah, it's a great perspective. And a lot of our leaders aren't technical enough to even understand what's happening before our eyes. So it's a big challenge for sure. Aaron, so what is the new perimeter? If data is everywhere and users are everywhere, what's the new perimeter?
It's really interesting if you think of the typical large enterprise. You have multiple sources of truth of who someone might be. You have a system when you're doing interviews, typically an applicant tracking system, that manages who the candidates are. And that's sort of a system of truth because we have the person's resume or CV there. We know who they applied for the job. And then suddenly, well, we've hired them, so now they're going to go into a different system of record that kind of has their payroll information. And maybe we've done an I-9 verification process in the US to make sure they're legal to work here. other things. Okay, but then we're going to put them into a directory, like an Active Directory of some kind, to sort of provision their credentials. And then maybe we have something like an Okta on top of it. And then maybe we have a support ticketing system like a ServiceNow. But ServiceNow is sort of the system of truth, because that's how we solve all the problems that come up at any of these silos. We have multiple parts that, funny enough, the only binding thing across all of them is some concept of identity. And in today's enterprise, that means the credential. That means that login that you got, that username and password. But the process to get that itself was never really designed for security, right? It's also itself kind of siloed. You know, the typical process of HR hiring someone, and some companies may be doing a background check, which 95% of background checks, by the way, in the US don't even do identity verification. They're based on someone's social security number. So if you're trying to impersonate someone, it's not the most terribly difficult thing to obtain. But okay, so you go through a background check, and the HR that does its best with the tools it has suddenly hands over to IT, and it's like, okay, IT, in a work order, go create and provision credentials for this user. And then let's say someone at their Gmail account suddenly gets an invitation, welcome to our company, click here to set up your MFA and set up your password, like the keys to our kingdom, so to speak. It's an incredibly insecure process that's exasperated in this world of remote work and contractors and hybrid work and distributed workforces. And that's the thing with trust that I think is so fundamental, to Jonathan's point. We are used to trusting what we see and what we hear. And in the real world, and people in this room, all of us, we can have that experience. But thanks to the last 5 years, so much of that has moved to digital interactions. And it's a bit existential, but we're at CES. We can't trust the cameras in most of our hardware devices. With few exceptions, the hardware, the cameras that we have in our laptops and our desktops are not physically, they are not connected to the trusted platform module, the TPM chip in the hardware. Which means if you want to use a deep fake, you simply edit the BIOS. I spent a lot of time at Microsoft and on hardware. This is not complex work. You edit the BIOS and you say, instead of what looks like the webcam, it's actually going to be my deep fake emulator. It's almost as easy as changing the camera or microphone on Zoom or Teams. So existentially, this is a big concern, because suddenly we can't trust these relationships we're building in the virtual world. And so that's the big piece that I think all of us haven't quite processed, to think about how that ripples through all these systems, to, again, how we're doing interviewing and what we do when we call the IT, the help desk for support or other things.
And this is how the North Koreans are getting hired into companies across the country and
It's a lot more
globally,
prevalent
right?
than people realize. Yeah.
And crafty and kind of obvious.
Yep. Huge threat.
One of our portfolio companies hired a North Korean.
Not
Yeah, I would say then they're one of many.
Yeah, that was embarrassing. So, didn't say who though. Kristina, so a few years ago, we were told zero trust was going to fix everything, right? Like zero trust, that's it. That's where it's at. Zero trust. Is that just hype? Is that marketing, or is there a real framework to zero trust that means something?
I think it started as a buzzword. The way that other things are buzzwords today. But I think now it's like a table stakes, sort of fundamental philosophical approach to how you think about what you're doing. And it goes across what everybody here has been saying regarding trust, other than to say, don't trust what you used to trust, right? So it's, to me, a core component about how we think about protecting our company. That we have layers of defense, and that at each of those layers, we're doing a double click to see if you kind of are who you are, if you're getting access to the things you should be getting access to, if the data is going the way where it should go, and all of that. So for me, it's, and I think there's a stat from Gartner that's like 61% of companies have now adopted some kind of framework of zero trust, but that means there's 40% or so of companies that haven't. And so this idea that you can just, blindly assume that because you put MFA on your system, you're good, and that's the only one kind of checks and balance that you need, I think that's where there's kind of, that kind of thought process is dated. And so zero trust now, as opposed to being a buzzword, really just is a kind of philosophical approach to how you should be thinking about security in your own environment, and layering in those different processes throughout so that you aren't assuming people are who they are at every turn. Because those sort of, to your point, kind of malicious components or people or actions can happen at various points in the, the attack chain, right? And so you want to be consistently verifying that people are who they are, they're getting the access they need, as I said. So I don't think it's a buzzword anymore, and I think now it's just part of the frameworks by which we all think about how we layer in our defenses and protect ourselves.
It's kind of getting everybody else thinking about how, we're all sort of professional paranoids, but everybody needs to think about it this way when we're operating in an environment where we do inherently trust people, but we can't anymore because of the nature of not just our business, but the way society works and the internet. encryption, Tom, this is a question for you. Where is it failing us? Is it in how it's deployed? Is it the way people use it? Why is that not solving all of our problems?
Well, I think to kind of join in on the zero trust conversation, I think encryption is a critical part of zero trust, right? So when we talk about encryption, we talk about encryption at rest, right? Is that the data is sitting on the device, encrypted, data in motion, encrypted through a secure, communication TLS, secure communication means, and then encryption in use, right? And encryption in use is where things kind of fall apart, right? You decrypt the data in order to use it, see it, and export it. And so this is a little bit harder to solve. But I think encryption in general, the encryption, if you're using like a standard, generally accepted, well-tested encryption method, you're not rolling or making your own encryption, right? Then you're generally good. And what I think where the things fall apart is the human implementation of encryption. Maybe I've chosen the wrong encryption method using symmetric keys where I need an asymmetric, where you are maybe storing the keys in applications, config files, and flat files, clear text, and allowing people to gain access to those things. So this is kind of things fall apart when humans get a hold of systems and they do things that are kind of like maybe unintentionally dangerous. So that's why I see the implementation of encryption can be something we need to keep an eye on.
Jonathan, who do you think should be ultimately responsible for establishing trust at scale? Should it be major international corporations? Should it be governments? We had a pretty famous, the cybersecurity industry had a pretty famous Israeli founder last week come out and talk about the need to regulate social media platforms a lot more, kind of very anti-American way of life kind of thoughts there, and it got a lot of blowback. So, but ultimately, from your perspective, who should be this? I mean, I think there's a lot of mistrust in international institutions these days. Is it an international organization? Is it who should it be? Who's going to save us?
Interestingly, the business community at the end of the Cold War developed a method of
Put your microphone up a little bit higher. Yeah.
developed a method of going around the state court systems. Before that, if you had a judgment from Canada and you tried to enforce it in the United States, it was very difficult to do that. I recall I had an instance where I had a client in that situation, and I told him, I don't think the Canadian company is going to get your money. We'll just make them crazy. So what happened was the corporations of the world and all of the financial institutions started using arbitration pursuant to the UN Convention on Arbitration. So that every transaction that is involved with multiple nations has an arbitration provision in it. And that system has worked marvelously. So you pick an arbitrator, I pick one, they pick a third one. So you get speed, you get decisiveness, you're not bound by stare decisis, and it's opaque. Business likes that. And trillions of dollars splash through the international currency every day using that, and commerce works very well. So business has been essential in creating a method of obtaining justice, which is needed in the commercial world. The problem is that in other areas in which justice is very important, and that's what we're talking about, justice and protecting privacy and protecting trade secrets, et cetera, there is no International Human Rights Court. There's no International Environmental Court. There's no International Cyber World Court. And and thus justice, which is considered a common good, has now become a commercial good. So we need to have the common good on all of these global issues. Otherwise we will remain in this problem that I personally saw. I had a diplomatic posting at the UN. I was representing the International Anti-Corruption Academy, which has permanent observer status in the General Assembly. Like the Vatican, you can get in the debate, but you can't vote because you're an international organization. And researching in that, I had a meeting with Adina Friedman, who gave a keynote here a few years ago, who is the woman who helped create NASDAQ. Now, NASDAQ we normally think of as a bourse, but it's not. It's a high-tech company that facilitates transactions and negotiable instruments. And she pointed out that one of their algorithms is effective in identifying illicit financial flows over 90% of the time. And I said, well, why is that? There's $2 to $4 trillion bled from the global economy every year. 2 to 4 trillion. That's enough to end poverty. It's enough to protect the climate. It's huge. And we can identify the illicit financial flows. And I said, why are we not able to capture that? She said, we don't have the international cooperative system doing it. So the bad guys look for the weak links in the system, and that's where they move the money faster than you can capture it, shells within shells within shells. So the issue comes back to, are we going to have an international system to protect the global commons, to protect the cyber world, or are we going to continue to facilitate adversity leading to the possible use of, by mistake, design, or madness, weapons of our own creation? Or are we going to remember our common humanity? So I come back to, we have to strengthen the United Nations system. We don't have a choice. The choice is to continue in a world in which adversity will lead to conflict, and you can't have that, as Albert Einstein said. The nuclear weapon has, the atomic bomb has changed everything except our thinking. And we know that we know how to do it, because we've gone down from over 70,000 nuclear weapons to less than 14,000. So we know how to do this, and we have the legal things. We don't have the public awareness and the political will. And in the subjects that we're talking about, specifically here in cybersecurity and AI, very much like nuclear, the public is insufficiently aware. I think we need a real public education. It would be wonderful if people like yourselves developed some coherent plan of educating the public in this technology.
I'm going to make a quick plug here for the National Cybersecurity Alliance. It's a nonprofit coalition of private sector, academia that has come together for this exact purpose, to help educate the consumers, the general public, on ways they can be safe online, what they need to be aware of, things along those lines. They have a ton of free resources available to everybody. It's a group that I've been involved with since 2004. And they're really, I think, helping try to do exactly what Jonathan was saying, is get the masses sort of involved and understanding what the risks are to them as individual people, but also, you know, as kind of singing that amplified song as all these companies who compete in the public space, right, coming together with unified messaging so that you're hearing the same thing from your email provider as you are from the bank that you bank at, as you are from the, you know, store that you go to buy a purse for, you know, Christmas or whatever it might be. And all of those groups coming together with that unified messaging, I think, is what will help kind of shift that narrative across the country and world. So
Thanks. So people aren't aware of those organizations like that. And that's your background. Like, you did some stuff like that when you were at DHS, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of good resources out there for that that people aren't aware of. Tom, what's your priority intelligence requirement for figuring out when AI is outlearning defenders at your organization, or just defenders more broadly? Like, what are we on the lookout for to know, you know, it's kind of like when it's becoming sentient and it's better than us and there's just no looking back?
It's a great defender question, right? So, you know, kind of day to day, you know, as we look at cyber events, we look at indicators of cyber attacks, you know, that any CISO or any security organization might look at. You know, one of the questions we ask is, you know, is it AI, right? And, you know, what it comes down to, and I think the big risk from AI is the speed that AI can compromise an environment, can take action, and even fool humans, right? So humans in the loop are much too slow to respond to AI-generated attacks. So some of the things that I might look for, or that any CISO might look for, are, you know, are the attacks that we're seeing, are they attacks that we're detecting and being able to, like, address and quarantine early in the attack chain? So is it like some sort of reconnaissance? Is it somebody maybe has gotten a foothold in an asset and they are trying to orient themselves, figure out where they are in the environment? Right? Are they trying to escalate privileges? Like, these are things that happen very early in attack cycles. Now, when I worry that AI might, you know, we might not detect an AI-based attack because they move so quickly until very end in this attack cycle, when data is being exfilled from a company, when someone has deployed ransomware, when you have systems that are being taken down, destroyed, damaged. Like, these are very late stage type of things that we would look for. And when you have more attacks that happen late stage, like, those should never happen, but if they do, you know, there's an indicator that it might be AI driven. Because I'd say, you know, AI is present everywhere. Attackers are using this every day. The other thing I might look for is can we trace an attack back to patient zero? Patient zero is the place where the attack first came in contact with your environment. So who was the user that was compromised? What was the system that was compromised? So one thing that AI has gotten really good at is finding vulnerabilities, weaponizing vulnerabilities into exploits, and then using those very, very fast. AI learns very, very quickly, much faster than humans, and be able to integrate this into attack cycles faster than humans can kind of learn how to defend. So now you see, if you cannot trace back to patient zero because maybe they've weaponized an exploit, this is a great indicator that maybe you have an AI-based attack engaged here. So I think the answer is using AI, right? Learning, using AI, and responding to anomalies that we consider very binary, right? Something like, let's say you have a user who has elevated privileges to an admin, and this rarely happens. Like, people are either given an admin account, but they're very rarely promoted to admin without some other detection. When that happens, we need an automated detection, and we need to intervene with automation. Like, those are the principles we need to respond with automation to.
Kristina, maybe you could add on to that. How do we get ahead of AI operationally?
I was just thinking, though, as he was talking, one of the things we're concerned about, like what he's essentially talking about is user behavior and the analytics of that, right? Like, so UBA, right? Like, what are your users usually doing? And then where are their anomalies and what their actions are? But as we start deploying agents into our systems, and there's a world we're going to live in where we're going to have hundreds of thousands of agents across large companies, right, working on your behalf. How does that look from an identity perspective? Are they non-human identities? Are they given a real identity? Are they a coworker of yours? What does that look like? That's a whole other question that I'm very concerned about. But with respect to the user behavior component, things that you previously tagged as anomalies that would have escalated your concern and said, okay, I need to be worried, there might be some bad guy in my network, in my system, et cetera. You may not think that anymore because it could be an agent acting on your behalf, and they're doing things in different times. They might get those escalated privileges at some point to be able to do work on your behalf. And how are you going to be able to differentiate between the normal behaviors of an actual true individual and then also the behaviors of your agents in your systems? And so I think that's something that we need the tech community to also help us with as they're talking about the use of agents and AI across their platforms and their software and systems, that they're also thinking about what that looks like in practice, from how we secure those agents, how we make sure they're doing what they need to do, and how they can actually look different in deployment from an individual human, so that you can make those decisions around whether it's real, not real, and things along those lines.
It's kind of hard to get it's more difficult to get a baseline now.
Yeah,
what
it
normal
will be.
looks like. Yeah.
I mean, and right now I don't have thousands of agents in my environment, but I'll have hundreds of thousands of agents, right? As soon as we kind of loosen the reins for everybody, because there's a lot of clamoring for that. So, but I think the biggest thing goes back to what we were saying with zero trust, right? Like, it's checks and balances at multiple points. It's governance in depth. Like, you talk a lot about defense in depth. We need governance in depth at different levels with different ways, so that you're thinking through at various points if that's what you want those agents, people, whatever, to be doing for you and on your behalf.
Big picture question here, Aaron. Like, does AI centralize power or decentralize power?
I think it democratizes power. And so I think it decentralizes maybe a little bit of a loaded word and from the crypto and blockchain world, but I think it democratizes it. I think it gives a lot of people access. I would say AI has given superpowers to bad actors, actually. And so it is a tool that now everyone can use, and they're using it in really, really creative ways. And interestingly, some of them might eventually be automated attacks, but today they're humans using the tools, Copilot style, and they're getting great assists to do more powered attacks, including the one you mentioned a few weeks ago was largely that. It was someone being very crafty with an LLM and having to analyze the data it stole and who to go after and where. There was still a human involved, but they had incredible superpower assist.
It depends. If there are private individuals or governments that have excessive information on populations that are not accountable, not transparent, not operating in the public interest in a way that we can observe and that they're accountable to us as citizens, then it's going to synthesize power in ways that we may not even know. On the other hand, if we have the model in which these institutions are our employees, that's what governments are supposed to be, then I think it's very possible that it will have a democratizing capacity. If, on the other hand, the governments remain opaque to its citizens the way the Chinese model or the Russian model is, in which the citizens are the employees and the government's the employer, then I think it's very dangerous.
Yep.
So we're in a battle right now as to which model we're going to follow.
We're running out of time here. 40 minutes just flew by. So let's just kind of wrap it up with like one set of questions and just kind of keep it pithy as possible, but obviously expand upon it as much as needed. Kristina, what's the next wave of threats organizations are least prepared for?
I mean, if I don't say quantum, I feel like, I'm missing the boat.
There's so many different dates for quantum.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem because it's not the most immediate threat you have today, which we're all trying to combat like regularly, like the bad guys today who are trying to exfiltrate data from my environment, steal money from my clients, right? So because it's not right here, it's what we're saying, okay, I can deal with that tomorrow, right? Like I can deal with that tomorrow. And so there'll come a time where we can't say that, but you have to start today to get prepared for that.
It's not like Y2K.
Well, it could be.
Maybe it could be like
We'll see, I don't know.
Aaron, how is the identity, like we've talked about identity a lot today, how is the identity space going to change over the next year or two?
I think the fundamental primitive that we rely on to run credentials is failing, and it is absolutely collapsing with these new technologies. And so now it is about knowing, is someone human? Which human are they? Ideally, where are they? Other attributes that we trust from real-world signals we need to bring into the virtual world.
Tom, if you had to reallocate 20% of your security budget today, where would it go?
Well, as a CISO, I could today.
Strategic
if I
cyber
needed
venture
to.
portfolio companies.
Yeah. So,
Name tag.
so as a CISO, I could today if I needed to. But I think, I'm happy with where we allocate our budget, and I'm happy with the budget we have and where we spend. We're
Must have a board member in the room here.
Oh, no. No, of course not. It's the truth. But, in speaking to other CISOs and like hearing people like get advice from consultants and things like this, one thing that I'm always surprised about is how people spend a lot of money on things that give them kind of like visibility with like posture management of things and then create nice slides and dashboards, but they're not actually acting. So I think that, we need to spend more money on things that actually take actions on our behalf to stop attacker behavior, create friction to attackers.
Just more like
More dashboards
lights
and reports and
yeah.
things like that, yeah.
Jonathan, so what decision or two in the next 2 years will most influence whether AI becomes a stabilizing or a destabilizing force globally?
Whether the governance of AI is transparent and there's accountability, and whether we're able to put it under the rule of law, or whether it's able to operate in stealth without our even knowing. And I come back to the principle to love people, use things, never love things and use people. And if we are to use this technology, then we have to have the reins of law and morality in it, which might mean slowing down some things and speeding up others. But that, to me, is the principle that we have to have.
Great. That's a great way to end this. Thank you all for joining us here today. The time flew by. Thank you all for being on the panel. I think it was a great discussion. We're going to have to get Lobby CES next year to have a longer, bigger track about all this. So let's do that.
Sounds great.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.